endowed. This person is a buyer, which is not what's important. What's important is that they are money endowed. Okay? And now we have the last chapter in our story about the endowment effect. These indifference curves cross in a big, bad way. It's not subtle. Yeah? Now, because he went and found people, he took this group of women. Now, granted, they're not representative of the population as a whole. That's not what matters. What matters is that he randomly divided them into two groups. And by randomizing these two groups, he gets to claim, this is the whole point of experiments in the scientific method, he gets to claim that those people on average are the same. So that when he takes group averages, they should be the same. Now, granted, 10 is a pretty small sample size, but it was big enough for his purposes because if you don't get statistically significant results, you don't get published, right? So what we know is that with statistical significance, we see the average pen-endowed mother of a swimmer has, their indifference curve is much shallower than the same average mom placed into a different parallel universe in which she is cash endowed.
I just want to clarify, did these mothers know that prices of the pens were the same as the amount of money that...
Did they know sort of like that these were roughly 90-cent pens?
That they were the same value?
I don't know. I doubt if that's in the paper. I don't remember. Tell me why you think it might matter.
Because then you might value money more than pens. For example, if you knew that pens were cheaper.
So if you knew that pens were cheaper than what Knetch is offering them to you for.
For example, if you were in that 450 and someone else was offered 5 pens that were 80 cents each,
yeah.
then you would be, if you knew that, then you wouldn't want to trade at all.
Okay, so a couple of things are true. So first of all, you guys, some of you will know this. Most people's IQ goes down by about 20 points when they're standing in front of a large group of people. Mine is more like 30 points, and it's hot, and it's the end of the day. So we're going to need to talk that out in more detail when I have a little bit more bandwidth, like maybe after class or sometime. Okay, is that an acceptable answer? Yes. Behind closed doors, I claim I'll be smart enough to understand what you're saying. And then we'll see if that's an important issue. Okay. So we have these intersecting indifference curves. A couple of things that I want to emphasize. One, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, these things intersect not because one group was buying and one group was selling. If you have, under the endowment effect, what happens to indifference curves when you go from being a seller to being a buyer from the same endowment point? What happens to the shape of your indifference curve? They become kinked. Okay? But that isn't what makes them intersect. What makes them intersect is taking you from one indifference point, asking you to buy and sell mugs or pens or whatever, and then putting you on a different endowment point, and asking you to buy and sell again. Okay? So you can think of this as, here's one endowment point, here's another endowment point. This is the selling part of the indifference curve, is that right? Yes, it is. And this is the buying part of somebody else's of a different indifference curve. So you can imagine this person being asked to buy, this person being asked to sell, and what you would come up with is the exact picture that you saw in the problem set. Okay? It's not buying and selling with the endowment effect gives you a kink. Shifting endowment points gives you intersections. Why is going that way selling when in the problem set going that way was buying? Because he flipped his axes. How annoying is that? Okay? So for the purposes of the next clicker question, I want you to observe that usually when we do indifference curves of one good versus all other goods in the form of dollars, we usually put the dollars on the vertical axis. So you have to watch out for that. There was a question in the back. Yeah. About where exactly? So I don't know if it's statistically significant. So statistically it's possible, there's some circle you could draw around that and say, well, the true intersection point might be somewhere in that circle. That I don't know. Whether it matters where it is, like what is the actual economic significance of that intersection point, I don't have a good answer to that question. And what I would ask you is to sit down and think about that and puzzle over it. Email me the answer. Now, you might think that's silly, but I said that to a couple of people last Thursday, and they both did, and they were both right, which was fabulous. So yeah, no, seriously, puzzle that out. I'm not going to be able to think about it on my feet right now, but send me an email, and we can hash it out. Okay, what else do I want to say about this? So his indifference curves look like they're curved, where ours were straight, right? They both look like they're a little bit curved. Anybody have an idea of what that implies about this person's utility function, if we took that seriously? Why were our indifference curves straight on the problem set? Anybody remember, or anyone figure out, why the indifference curves? I mean, maybe you didn't come up with straight indifference curves. Maybe I didn't give you enough points on the indifference curve to see that, but you'll see it in the solutions. In the very simple case that I gave you on the problem set, you wind up with indifference curves that are literally like that, two straight lines.
Is it because the utility function is linear?
It's because the utility function is linear. More specifically, the value function that is sort of like the subcomponent is this kinked linear thing, right? So that's the value function. The slope of this thing is your marginal utility, right? So if you have linear marginal utility, if you have constant marginal utility for both dollars and mugs or pens, then you come up with linear indifference curves like this. Now, I said to you that in the prospect theory paper that actually developed this model, that their value function looked more like that. It was curved in both gains and losses, right? So we call that diminishing marginal sensitivity to gains and losses. And so that could be what's going on here with these curved indifference curves, is that these people have reference-dependent preferences and loss aversion and diminishing marginal sensitivity. And in fact, in most of studies of reference-dependent preferences, that's what we find. Okay, well, what else do I want to say about that? Now let me ask you, what do you think would happen if, let's say I took this group of folks who were endowed with pens, and redid the experiment, like a third group, let's say, and instead of giving them an endowment of 5 pence and no money, I gave them an endowment of 6 pence and $1. Sorry, that's not the question I want to ask. Sorry, forget that I said that. The question I want to ask you is, suppose that I kept these people at the same indifference point, the same endowment point, and then ask them questions like this. Instead of just asking them about these traits here, suppose I ask them how they feel about, okay, the temperature is getting high, my brain is melting. Yeah, this is what I want to say. Suppose that I took this person, and their reference point is 5-0. Suppose I could give them some additional pens and money without changing their reference point. Right? So we've seen that if I hand you a mug, your reference point changes like that. But suppose it took a little while for your reference point to change. So I'm holding you at this reference point, but then I'm giving you some additional pens and money with which to trade. And then I map out another indifference curve from there without your reference point changing. What do you think about that indifference curve? Would it intersect with the first one? Should or should not? It should not. Okay, so what you'll find is that you wind up with, as long as the reference point stays the same, you'll wind up with sort of these maps of indifference curves that look like you want them to look, that look nicely nested and don't intersect. So you could imagine doing this, and as it turns out, actually, Knecht was actually borrowing from somebody else's experimental design, and that's exactly what the original experiment was. And you'd wind up with these two different families, okay, like two sets of waves that intersect. Good? All right. So we're going to make use of that in a second. First, I'll just say some okay. I'm sure you just love how self-important I am. Extremely important point. The reason that indifference curves cross, so this is a badly written sentence. Indifference curves don't cross because people are sellers in one condition and buyers in the others. They cross because of the difference in reference points. So I've already said that, right? The difference between buying and selling, holding the endowment point constant, is what gives us the kink. The intersection of indifference curves requires that you switch the endowment point. So that's been said. Here's sort of an even more important point. So we're from extremely to I don't know what, like insanely important. If we wanted to, we could think of what you are endowed with as being sort of like a state, right? So I talked about the difference between the state of being in love versus the state of not being in love, or the state of being hungry versus the state of not being hungry. Microeconomic theory doesn't have a problem with what are referred to as state-dependent preferences. That's not inherently irrational, right? The typical example is most people prefer an umbrella to an ice cream cone on a cold, rainy day, but on a hot, sunny day, most people would prefer an ice cream cone to an umbrella. If that's not true for you, you should come to my office hours, and we'll discuss what's really going on, and there may be resources that I can point you towards. So long as preferences are consistent, conditional on your state, so long as your preferences between umbrellas and ice cream are stable on a rainy day and stable on sunny days, right? So that's what I mean by conditional on the state, conditional on the weather. You still get to call yourself rational, right? Because the weather should affect your preferences. That's not weird. Because that's not ceteris paribus anymore, right? Now I'm allowing some important factor of your preferences to change. Okay? The question is, should we treat a completely exogenous change in endowment over the space of a few minutes as a legitimate change in state? Okay? So imagine taking a specific, sort of swimmer mom, and you endow her with pens, look at her preferences, then erase that tape, rewind the universe, and take the exact same swimmer mom, now by erasing the tape and rewinding the universe, I'm saying hold absolutely everything the same, except changing her endowment from 5 pence to $4.50, and you check her preferences and they're completely different. The question you want to ask yourself about the endowment effect does that rise to the level of being treated as a legitimate state change, right? Hot day to cold day is a pretty major state change. Hungry to not hungry is a pretty major state change, right? The sort of somewhat cynical state dependent thing that has been looked at a lot is if you're saving for retirement, your preferences might change because by the time you get to retirement, your spouse might be dead, and all of a sudden money doesn't matter as much to you, or something like that. These are legitimate changes in state. Does I just randomly gave you a mug really constitute a legitimate state change, or is it just kind of weird that your preferences change radically because Jack Knecht gave you pens instead of money? Okay, the issue gets more sort of like even if you want to say no, that's a different state, it's materially different. There's a bunch of studies, and I haven't showed you them, but there's a bunch of studies where I can get a preference reversal using state-dependent preferences just by changing the wording of the question, right? So like the forest versus money thing, I can actually set that up where the only difference between the willingness to accept condition and the willingness to pay condition is the wording of the question. And the actual bundles that you're being asked to choose between are materially identical, okay? And you get massive shifts from massive differences between willingness to pay and willingness to accept simply based on the wording of the question. You don't get to claim that that's state-dependent preferences, I don't think. Are you on board with that, or right? There's something goofy going on in our heads. There's something really goofy going on. Okay. So I want to say opinions vary. There are people who will say, no, absolutely, this is just purely a state change. But even if that's true, even if I'm willing to say, look, no, these maps of indifference curves, this is the same person in two different states. I'm really going to believe that and say this is not irrational. Conditional on the state, these people are actually rational. There still becomes this question, which is, do people predict the change from one state to another? So tune in to lecture 12. I think it's actually now lecture 13 or 14, and we'll talk more about that. There's definitely something fishy going on here. Okay. So we're running out of time. I'm going to skip this slide. This is simply the thing where I show you a map of indifference curves, and I show you how, based on some price, I can identify some quantity, and then I can, map it out over here and come up with a map of a demand curve, right? You remember that from last time? So this is simply to remind you how we derive demand curves, right? So if I had two different prices, right, I'd get two different, that's P1, that's X1, that's X, oh God, come on. And how do I get back out? Okay, that's X1, believe me. And you could map out, sort of P1, X1, P0, X0, no, it's the other way around. And you get a demand curve. From the slope of the indifference curve to the height of the demand curve. Okay? That's the lesson here. We talked about it last time. What I want you to do is, going back to the indifference curves in the Knecht study that we just looked at 2 slides back, the eye-clicker question, I want you to do this in groups for just a few minutes, is if we take those two sets of indifference curves, what would the demand curves look like derived from Knecht's intersecting indifference curves? That, for several years now, that has said mugs instead of pens, so I apologize for that. These are all pens. And so this notation here, P for M, M for P, that's the same as the notation on Knecht's map of indifference curves. Money for pens, pens for money. Just go back to those indifference curves, look at their slopes, tell me what you think the demand curves derived from those two families of indifference curves would look like. Which of these diagrams matches it best? I'll switch this on and leave it running. You guys talk amongst yourselves for a couple of minutes. Don't forget about the flipped axes. No, the P, that's price. Yeah, question was just asked, is this pens versus pens? No, the P on the vertical axis is price. This is a demand curve. It's price versus quantity. Raise your hand if you need just a little more time. Yeah? Oh, most of you are done? Okay, I'll give you about another 15 seconds. Oh, sorry, E is no answer. E is no answer, so you can get your participation point that way. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and come on, there's one more. There you go. Oh, someone else came in. Good. All right, let's take a look. Aha! I don't have anywhere to put that. So a lot of you said D, almost half. About a third said C, 10% B, and just 6% of you said A. We got a couple minutes. Who wants to defend their answer? Looks like D has got a lot of company. Who wants to defend an answer of D? Anybody? Yeah. Tell me your name again.
My name's Patrick.
Patrick.
To go back to the previous indifference curves, different from most indifference curves has already kinds of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did is I kind of held my hand out sideways, so dollars on the y-axis.
Aha. So you flipped it.
Flipping it in my head so that pens
So,
goes from 2 to 10.
by the way, technically the way you want to do that is to flip it around and then you want to turn it around and flip it. So you're looking through the paper. Yes, you are looking through the paper. Yeah, I've always thought about bringing a piece of plexiglass for doing. But you're looking at indifference curves, which is MUDs versus money. It's not the same thing as MUDs versus price.
Or my versus money is not there.
Right? You're right. So this is where we're going from indifference curves, which is a model of two good consumer choice, to a demand curve, which is just looking at one of those goods. And the price, which is the height of the demand curve, is equal to what feature on the indifference curve? The slope. Okay. Steeper means higher. Steeper indifference curves means higher demand curve. So there was our indifference curves. Okay. When you're pen endowed, M for P. Remember, flip it that way. You have steeper indifference curves than when you're money endowed. Okay. So M for P has a steeper set of indifference curves, which means, whoops. Okay. Here was M for P. So steeper indifference curve means higher demand curve, right? And there's one where M for P is higher than P for M everywhere. Okay. If you go back and look at those maps of indifference curves, the map for people who are pen endowed is steeper than the map for the people who are money endowed for any quantity of pens. Okay, they don't cross. There's no point at which where the one for pens suddenly is less steep than the ones for money. The ones for pens are always steeper than the ones for money. Now you might say, well, wait a minute, but they intersect. But look at the slopes at the point where they intersect. Okay, the slopes never reverse. So the answer is A, right? And the key is to look at the slopes of the indifference curves. All of this will be relevant to the problem set 2, which is posted, and I will see you on Thursday.